The train hissed like a waking serpent as it rolled into Fiddler's Green, its iron wheels biting cinders that had lain undisturbed for half a century. What had once been a Nevada silver rush town, abandoned when the loads ran dry and a fever took the rest, had been resurrected for one peculiar week each autumn as the Empire Exposition of mechanomancers and aerostatic wonders. Brass balloons bobbed above clapboard roofs, smoke plumed from traveling laboratories, and banners the color of tarnished sunset snapped in the wind. The living had returned to consort with the ghosts, and Eleanor Blythe, correspondent for the London Illustrated Gazette, stepped onto the platform with her fountain pen drawn like a sword. Eleanor had chased stories across oceans, electrified boulevards in Paris, dirigible races over the Sahara, but something beneath her ribs vibrated at the prospect of Fiddler's Green. A rumor had reached her desk. A reclusive clockmaker planned to unveil a device capable of bending the hours backward. If true, it would be the scoop of her career. If very true, it might rewrite the notion of career altogether. For what good were deadlines when time itself could be redrafted? The man in question, Thaddeus Gray, occupied the attic above what had been the town undertaker's shop. He was not on the program pamphlet, but exhibitors whispered about him the way sailors spoke of maelstroms, half with dread, half with longing. Gray had once been lauded as the Crown's premier horologist, crafting carriage clocks so precise they gained but a single second a decade. Then, 12 years ago, he vanished after a catastrophic explosion in his London workshop. Some said he'd lost his fortune, others said he'd lost his mind. Both could be true, Eleanor reasoned, but they did not preclude him from possessing the most pivotal invention of the modern age. On her first dusk in town, she followed the rattle of gears to the central square, where a marble statue of Queen Victoria had been refitted with pneumatic arms that waved stiffly at passers-by. Stalls housed spectacles, a tea brewer that read a lady's fortune in its own steam, a mechanical dog that recited Latin verbs. Yet the crowd pressed thickest before the old clock tower, its face dark, its hands sheared off. Drafts of cold air slipped from the doorway, air that carried a different scent than the desert's baked dust, something metallic and sorrowful. Eleanor ducked inside and climbed a spiral stair illuminated by oil lamp. Part way up, she swore she heard the rasp of metal gnawing on itself. By the time she reached the belfry, the sound resolved into dozens of cogs spinning not forward but backward, teeth catching with insect precision. They formed an orrery of timepieces, pocket watches, mantel clocks, even a child's music box suspended by copper wire in a globe around a solitary man. Thaddeus Gray might have been 40 or 60. Time had etched ambivalent lines into his pallid face. A leather apron shielded his waistcoat, and brass pince-nez pinched his hawkish nose. He neither greeted her nor challenged her intrusion, only studied the reversing gears as if they spoke a language no one else could hear. "Mr. Gray," Eleanor began, unfurling her notepad, "I'm told you proposed to turn yesterday into tomorrow." "Yesterday is obstinate," he replied, voice gravelly. "It returns whether one proposes or not." She recorded the words verbatim. "Will you demonstrate your mechanism at the expo?" Gray's eyes flickered to her for the first time, and for an instant Eleanor feared she was gazing at someone being slowly pulled under water. "The mechanism demonstrates itself," he murmured, "at inopportune moments." Before she could press further, a tremor rippled through the suspended clocks. A chill whipped across Eleanor's cheeks. Her pen leaped a blot of ink, unwinding like smoke. Somewhere below, the tower bell tolled, but the strike echoed backward dong. 9, dong, 8, dong, 7, retracting into silence. Then, just as abruptly, everything stopped. The gears hung motionless, and Eleanor's blot of ink crawled up the page, returning obediently to the nib, as if the paper had never been disturbed. She exhaled. "Sweet mercy." Gray sagged, bracing himself on a support beam. "You see the difficulty," he said. "Time is ungovernable. I can coax it. I cannot cure it." Eleanor closed her notebook. "Then perhaps you require an outside perspective." He turned aside. or an exorcist. Outside, carnival lanterns flickered to life. Eleanor descended the staircase with heart-hammering sensation returning to her limbs. She'd witnessed illusions before. Pepper's ghosts, kinescopes, a medium who made table legs tap messages from the dead, but this was no sleight of hand. If she could document a repeatable temporal reversal, she might expose the greatest scientific scandal since alchemy, or confirm the greatest breakthrough since steam. Yet a more private thrill stirred her curiosity. When the gear storm blossomed, she had glimpsed behind Gray's stoicism a rawness aching to speak. What tragedy had driven him to seize time's reins? Journalists prided themselves on maintaining professional distance, but Eleanor had lived enough years to know that distance often blurs the view. She resolved to return the next night. Meanwhile, Fiddler's Green buzzed. Attendees conspicuously sported goggles, whether or not they ventured near boilers. Vendors sold parasols spoked with turbines that cooled one's brow. A gentleman demonstrated a pistol that fired bottled lightning, igniting half the saloon in the process. Into this pageantry Eleanor wandered with quick shorthand and quicker wit, filing dispatches by telegraph, yet her mind waltzed with clockwork phantoms. On the second evening, she brought tea in a pewter flask. Gray accepted the cup absently, steam fogging his spectacles. The air in the belfry shimmered with tension. The clocks lay dormant, poised like hunting cats. "I thought perhaps conversation might temper the hours," she said. "A valiant superstition." She gestured at the suspended maze. "When did this begin?" He hesitated. Gaze snagged on a locket watch rotating slowly in place. Its glass was fractured. Inside, instead of hands, sat a photograph of a woman with severe brows and mischievous eyes. "The night Elizabeth died," he said. Eleanor leveled her breath. Death was the century's most common denominator. Still, the way he said her name, as if releasing shards from his throat, pierced her. "The explosion?" she prompted gently. "No," he answered. "That came later, for my arrogance. Elizabeth succumbed to fever. Though a surgeon swore she would recover, the hours slipped through my grip like water. When her pulse failed, the clocks in my workshop all gained 9 minutes. Simultaneously, I reset them. They gained again. I smashed them. Their gears contorted, rebuilt themselves, and began to turn the wrong way." He swallowed. "I followed them here because this was the last town she traveled through when we courted. Time, it seems, remembers better than I do." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You believe the phenomenon is attached to you personally?" "Observe." He lifted a tiny gear polished to mirror brightness, then turned it between his fingers. The gear spun of its own accord, reversing direction each time his thumb moved. "They obey grief, not geometry." She traced the rim of her teacup, weighing ethics against urgency. "If the clocks truly answer emotion, perhaps emotion can dismiss them." His chuckle sounded like snapped springs. "As simple as forgiving fate? I have tried. Apologies ricochet within the hours. They do not escape the echo." Eleanor reached into her satchel, withdrew a folded sheet. It was the first article she'd ever published, age 19, covering a textile strike where workers demanded both fair wages and funeral insurance. "Read the byline," she said. He adjusted his pince-nez. "E. Blythe. Are you aware how many assumptions that brief initial obliterates? Editors assumed I was a gentleman. When I arrived, they sneered. Some still do. Each dispatch I write is a particle of resistance. I tell you this because sorrow is not the only motor capable of moving gears. So is resolve." Gray considered her, caught between skepticism and yearning. "Tomorrow night," she proposed. "Allow me to witness a full cycle. From the instant the gears wake until they sleep." He bowed his head. Acquiescence or exhaustion she could not tell. The next 24 hours crawled. Eleanor eavesdropped on inventors, compiled sketches and mailed features to London, but her pulse tethered itself to the tower. At sunset, she climbed the stair once more, notebook ready. Gray awaited in the center of his orbit, candles stationed around him like sentries. He had wound every clock forward to 11 minutes before midnight and chalked a circle on the plank floor. "The event horizon, if you will," he said. "Remain outside it." Eleanor poised her pen. Midnight loomed. The first gear clicked. The second whirred. A chain reaction rippled outward. Clock faces gleamed, light refracting off brass bevels. Eleanor felt the hairs on her arms rise as temperature plunged. Outside the tower, revelers cheered a hot air balloon race. Inside, minutes unraveled. Clocks struck 12 in reverse. Gongs inhaled their clangs. Wind gusted through the rafters as though pulled by a gargantuan bellows. Gray's eyes rolled white. His breath steamed. In the air around him appeared faint silhouettes. A woman seated at a piano, her outline composed of motes. A younger Thaddeus offering her a pendant, the pair walking a railway platform. Each scene accelerated, backward handshakes unclasped, glances rewound, smiles curled into neutrality. The images halted at one tableau. Elizabeth lying in a canopied bed, perspiration beading her temples. Gray knelt beside her, begging time to halt. The ghost gear constellation above flared, the tower walls vanished. For a heartbeat, Eleanor smelled antiseptic and wilted lilies. She could not remain outside the chalk ring. Leap of faith trumped caution. She stepped across, seized Gray's wrist, and anchored him to the present. She is memory, not map. Do not lose the path you still walk. Time quivered like glass, about to shatter. Gray focused on Eleanor Reel. Breathing, ink-stained. He clenched her hand. The gears shrieked, metal on metal. One by one, they spat free from their wires, clattering to the floor. Seconds surged forward. The phantasms thinned to gauze and dissipated. The tower's wooden beams solidified around them. When silence returned, the largest gear lay at Eleanor's feet, motionless for the first time since she'd arrived. She bent, ears ringing, and tucked it into her pocket. Gray swayed. She guided him to a chair. He buried his face and wept like machinery releasing pent steam. Eleanor stroked his shoulder until the tremors eased. At dawn, a peach-colored hush blanketed Fiddler's Green. Vendors dismantled contraptions, tracks crisscrossing the dust. Eleanor and Gray sat on a porch, sipping chicory coffee. For the first time, his hands were still. "I felt her breathing again," he whispered. "Then I felt you breathing." The latter was weightier. Eleanor touched the rim of her cup. The intimacy of dawn made everything possible to say, though nothing obligatory. "Where do we proceed?" she asked. He glanced at the skeletal tower. "If the gears have stilled, I must relearn moving only forward. Perhaps build clocks that favor the sunrise. There's a chronometer competition in New York," she offered casually, though her pulse galloped. "I'm assigned to cover it." He smiled, tentative as fresh solder. Transatlantic steamships gain no minutes by sorcery. "Only by weather," she agreed, "and conversation." A sudden commotion rattled Main Street. An aeronaut's steam carriage had stalled, belching soot, its boiler reversed, sucking exhaust into itself. Attendees shrieked in delight, assuming it a stunt. Eleanor paled. She pulled the stilled gear from her pocket. It quivered like a heart startled awake. A hairline crack traced along its rim, but the central axle tried to rotate backward. Gray stared. "It appears grief is not the sole conductor. The gears may attach to hope as well. Can we contain it?" He closed her fingers around the metal. "Contain, no. Guide, perhaps." They exchanged a look neither could yet categorize as relief or terror. But the spark was undeniable. Destiny buckled when confronted by two people who refused to idle. Over the next nights, they co-authored an uneasy truce with chronology. Gray fashioned a lead-lined box etched with runic numerals. Eleanor documented every anomaly. Whenever the gear rattled, they hurried to the source. A misfiring locomotive, a mirror showing yesterday's reflection, and recalibrated mechanisms urging time to resume its lawful August march. Word spread of the temporal brigade, equal parts folklore and advertisement. The expo extended another week by popular demand. During rare intervals of calm, they explored the town's abandoned outskirts, where shattered windows framed the desert like enormous stereoscopes. One evening, they found the shell of a dance hall. Dusty phonograph cylinders lay scattered. Gray repaired the gramophone crank. Eleanor guided his palm. Charleston rhythms swirled, and amid decay they waltzed. A collapsing roof revealed constellations above, each star a rivet in a cosmic hull, sailing forever forward, refusing to reverse. Their partnership, though nascent, tasted of many lifetimes. Eleanor sometimes wondered whether the gear's mischief had flung her into versions of herself she had not yet lived: spinster, adventuress, widow, bride. Whichever fate awaited, the present moment coursed with more voltage than any galvanic battery. On the expo's final night, the mayor, an impresario in scarlet tails, begged Gray to display his chrono spectacle atop the clock tower. Ticket prices soared. Gray declined. Eleanor spoke on his behalf. Some forces are not entertainment, she said, and yet around midnight the crowd gathered anyway, necks craned. They wanted validation, fear, glory. Eleanor handled logistics. She and Gray ascended the belfry, gearbox in tow. Below, lanterns bobbed like will-o'-the-wisps. Gray unlocked the box. The gear rattled, then soared upward, magnetized to the tower's iron bell. Clocks around the square began ticking in reverse. Gas lamps guttered to darkness. Cheers mutated into screams. Eleanor shouted over the gale, "We can't wrestle every cog forever. Give them a destination." Gray's eyes blazed with revelation. He seized a hammer, climbed to the bell, and struck its flank thrice. Vibrations rang outward. The row gear aligned with the bell's clapper, meshing teeth to bronze. Time stuttered, then resumed forward motion. Except, Eleanor noted, the tower's face, where new hands pivoted to midnight as if just installed. The crowd exhaled. Steam engines sputtered to life again. Violins resumed. Many believed they'd witnessed pyrotechnics. Only a few felt seconds hitch in their veins. Back on the landing, Gray clasped Eleanor's soot-smudged cheeks. "You asked where we proceed," he said. "Wherever we are summoned together." She pressed her forehead to his. "Journalism vows me to the chase. Consider yourself a perpetual headline." He laughed, a sound free of rust. "And you, my dear, have gifted time a byline." They descended into dawn. Trains awaited on parallel tracks, east for Eleanor's editor, west for Gray's wandering apprenticeship. Yet timetables are mere suggestions when cogs bow to spirit. At the platform's midpoint they halted, suitcases in hand. "Left or right?" he asked. She tucked her pen behind her ear, the very gesture the Lockett photograph had preserved. "Forward." Hand in hand they boarded the third option, a mail car refitted with propellers bound for the clouds. Its engineer promised it would circle the continent before breakfast or after, depending how one measured the journey. The lovers, untroubled, found seats by a porthole. In her notebook, Eleanor penned one line: "Time favors the brave, but it adores the two who dare negotiate." Outside, Fiddler's Green dwindled, clock tower gleaming gold, where the bell absorbed first light. Somewhere inside it, a cracked gear spun quietly. Not backward, not forward, but in perfect synchrony, with a pair of hearts learning to keep time anew.